l'histoire à la grève générale en France.
Yes, I'm speaking just as a rank and file member of University of Professional and Technical Employees. I'm a medical interpreter at the University of California in San Francisco. I've been working there for 12 years. During this previous contract negotiations, which we finally signed this year, the University of California again was trying to impose upon us what's called an opt-out version of what's a defined contribution plan, retirement plan. Defined contribution means you know how much you're putting in, but you don't know how much you're going to get out. The people of Chile know how much they ended up being able to get out. Nothing. After 35 years of, 40 years of having a privatized pension system in Chile, defined contribution system called, in Chile it's called AFP, Fondos Privados, Fondo de Pensión. Those are the privatized systems that are tied up with the global capital markets. The same systems that are screwing over workers here through Fidelity Investments and other capital asset management companies that are charging exorbitant rates, that are making workers have to bear the brunt of any risk of the market instead of having a more pooled risk that would come from public pensions. Public pensions have been under attack for many years now, just like Social Security. Social Security is also something that's being attacked. And the government has basically, in the United States, has been taking money from Social Security and not even giving it back. And then they say that Social Security is unsustainable. What's unsustainable is a system that they've created where they've been getting all the riches and they've been socializing all the risks but getting all the benefits. That's exactly what's been going on with the pension system in Chile. The pension system is actually managed and owned by none other than the brother of Sebastián Piñera, José Piñera. The same president who declared war on the people because they are fighting in the streets against the same pension plan that they're imposing upon the workers of Chile. Somebody who's given money and who's been paying into the pension plan for 35 years a teacher ends up working, ends up getting less than 100,000 pesos a month. That's like $120. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's about $120 a month in Chile. That would be more or less the equivalent. 50% or more of the Chilean people earn a minimum wage of 301 pesos a month. That's about $400 or so. The reason people are out in the streets today in Chile is because they're not listening. They put a law in Chile recently where they were going to raise their 100,000 pesos to 165,000 pesos. That is an insult. They also said that they were going to raise the minimum wage, but it wasn't really a raise. It was a subsidy, a government subsidy, like the Walmartization economy, where Walmart gets to pay workers shit wages, and then the government pays the workers because they qualify for food stamps. That's called subsidizing capital, big capital. It's subsidizing the class of industrialists, the class, the oligarchy. That's the government, us subsidizing them, as always. Just like here, we subsidize these major corporations that have these enormous buildings over here, and they don't pay their fair share in taxes either. People have been shot in the eye. About 360 people so far are being shot in the eye by pellets. The militarized police have been just recently last night, a young man, a 22-year-old man was crushed. His whole pelvic bones were crushed by two armed vehicles exactly. Now, I want to say that we here have been doing as much as we can to support the people in Chile and the working class here as well. And in fact, we've been lucky to have labor members who have been very in solidarity with Chile. Last October 28th, a delegate of the Labor Council passed a resolution in support of the Chilean people's uprising and demand for economic equality and political freedom.
Yellow vests, masses of people who are protesting the conditions for people in France. And there is a general strike. Trains are shut down. Jets are shut down. Public workers, teachers, and students are protesting against the privatization of education here in front of the French consulate in San Francisco to show that we stand with them. Now, this French general strike is really the kind of action that we need in the United States. People complain about Trump and the economic policies in this country, but they think that the Congress or somebody else is going to solve them. But the French have a collective history. Of course, the French Revolution and the Paris Commune were examples of collective action of the French working class. So the French people have a long history of struggle, and we're supporting their strike. We're in favor of Macron being kicked out. It would be a victory not only for the French people, but people in Algeria, people around the world. So this struggle, this general strike, mass general strike that's going on, should be a lesson of what working people can do to defend themselves. And it's not unique. There have been struggles in Korea. There was a general strike in Korea. There were million-person rallies in Korea that kicked out Park Geun-hye, the dictator of Korea. And it shows that collective action can defeat governments and can defend against the attacks that working people are facing. And the French general strike has been going on for some time now, and it's increasing support. And there was a survey done, and 66% of the French people support the general strike, despite the inconvenience, despite the fact that they're having trouble getting to work. So what does this show? It shows that when you have collective action of working people, it unites people, and it brings people together who are also being affected by the economic austerity, by increase in pensions, by increase in taxations. The billionaires in France, like the billionaires in the United States, seem to have carte blanche. They can do whatever they want. And that is one of the reasons there is a general strike. We have an Amazon store right down the street getting rid of all the workers to make more profits for Bezos and the billionaires in the United States. And that's what this strike is about. The strike is about the fact that billionaires in France really are, they have an austerity policy for the working class. The billionaires are basically pauperizing the working class, the students, the poor, for more profits. And that's exactly what's going on in this country, where the 1%, less than 1%, 7 men can own more than 50% of the wealth of the United States. I mean, how could that be that 7 people could have more wealth than 50% of the people of the United States? Well, that's capitalism. Capitalism on a global level. And we are demanding that the same struggle here take place. We're demanding that people here have a right to live with housing. In San Francisco, you have thousands of people homeless. Thousands of people homeless in Oakland, yet the billionaires continue to have their wealth. In San Francisco, there are many billionaires. They're doing great this Christmas, this holiday, but the working people in San Francisco can't survive. Working people can't live in San Francisco. They're being forced out. And many workers have to commute 2.5 hours, 3 hours to Central Valley to work here. Also, we're going to have some report on what's going on with City College, where they're cutting classes. Can you imagine? They're cutting classes at community college in San Francisco, yet their billionaires have tremendous wealth in San Francisco. That's part of what's going on in this country and in San Francisco.
Is definitely something that comes in from, from a history standpoint. This is not new. We were colonized by the French, and now there is a new way of colonizing Algeria. It's not through boots on the ground, but multinationals such as Total and others who are basically ripping off the resources in Algeria in order to basically take all the benefits for their own and leave Algerians without their own resources. So basically stolen, and while at the same time they'll keep a military junta in power in order to make sure that the system is kept that way, that the status quo remains, and just like Stephen said, this is not a French or an Algerian problem, this is a global problem. It is the liberal system has failed, and we are seeing some of the consequences now.
I'm an old teacher now. Even when I was young, I needed notes. And with the workers in France and our heroic comrades in Algeria, apparently the French and the British have learned nothing from their bloody colonial past. They, like some nations, like individuals, have bad habits and a terrible history, and they brag about it and seek to repeat those terrible mistakes of the past. I've been a teacher for 48 years. In fact, that's the only real job I've had as an adult. I worked in grocery stores in Texas as a teenager, and I worked for a time in a cannery in Davis, California. I've always felt useful as a teacher. I know that art, literature, and music nourish the soul and unite us in the struggles against oppression, and that universal public education, that is preschool through university, is the greatest ally of freedom and equality. Education helps us to understand the difference between theoretical and actual democracy, and that we are totally free and liberated only when we have economic democracy. And in my view, in this country, we have a great deal of theoretical democracy, but very little economic democracy, and we must struggle for that. Education also helps us to understand the difference between wars of national liberation and legitimate defense and the undeclared interventionist wars that our country has committed, has waged over the years. There's something deeply troubling, as Steve said, about the struggle at San Francisco City College, and that same struggle is going on throughout California. The California Master Plan for Higher Education, which was legislated in the 1960s, is, in my view, one of the most revolutionary, visionary, and humane education documents in human history. That the aim of that great plan was to make sure that public higher education became affordable and even free in the not too distant future. Many of the people, including the President Chancellor at City College and the state chancellors, have betrayed that great visionary document. The California Community College system is one of the greatest educational institutions in the world and one of the most democratic and cost-effective. However, it's been led, that system has been led by incompetent, bureaucratic educational entrepreneurs like Bryce Harris, the chancellor who was in power during our accreditation struggle, was an ally of the Accreditation Commission, which tried to close down City College, one of the great one of the great colleges in this country. I don't know if many of you are old enough to remember who I.F. Stone was, but he was a heroic journalist who was one of the most eloquent and consistent and effective advocates against the Vietnam War. I heard him speak once in 1967 at the largest anti-Vietnam war rally in the country in that era. In his book, he published 2 books, and in one of the books, he has an article, has a section on Curtis LeMay. I don't know if anybody here remembers who Curtis LeMay was, but some of you do. At any rate, he was one of the right-wing leaders in the U.S. military. He also ran, I believe, as vice president at one point, and didn't get elected, of course. But I.F. Stone's description, his article or section on LeMay is General Curtis LeMay, caveman and a supersonic bomber. Well, in my view, that analogy applies to the leader at San Francisco City College at the moment, Chancellor Mark Rocha, and to Bryce Harris, the former state chancellor of the community college system. Harris, for example, one time in one of the Occupy meetings, somebody said to me, "Well, Harris is a brilliant scholar, isn't he? I saw on his resume that he did graduate work at Harvard University." And I did some research on that. His, in quotes, graduate work at Harvard University, close quotes, was actually a 10-day workshop in the summer for school administrators that he paid $7,000 to attend. He was a fraud and an enemy of public education, just as Mark Rocha is, in my judgment. Now, at the moment, City College is in a very difficult financial situation, which is absurd considering that this city has a budget surplus in spite of the mayor's denials to that, and California has one of the largest surpluses in recent history. Now, in my judgment, people are united in fighting effectively the attempt to cut City College in ways, cutting out entire programs for seniors, lifelong learning classes, any number of other programs and classes that people need and deserve. In my view, it shouldn't take a no-confidence vote in Chancellor Rocha, although I think that's probably coming. It shouldn't take large protests, civil disobedience, and pressure from labor, religious, community, and progressive organizations and individuals to convince the Board of Trustees, to do their jobs as policymakers and custodians of the public trust. They've been intimidated by Rocha acting as if he's their boss rather than him being an employee of the district. The Board of Trustees has the authority and responsibility to preserve the programs and services that people need, and they also have the power to get emergency and long-term funding from San Francisco and California through the government in Sacramento. Especially when both the state and city have budget surpluses. We need to restore the funding to get us through the present crisis and to get long-term funding for the future. And one of the best ways to do that is through the Schools and Communities First initiative, which will generate, if passed, will generate $11 to $13 million a year throughout the state, and 40% of that money will go to schools and 60% will go to city services. And by my calculations, that would generate about $900 million for the city of San Francisco for schools and public services. In my view, we need to struggle, and I'm sure that we will win.
Like Steve was saying, I've found myself on the executive council of the Peralta Federation of Teachers. And over the East Bay, exactly the same things are happening at the community colleges that they're going on at CCSF, which I believe we've already heard about, I think. It's a major educational journal ran as a headline in the magazine, "Downsizing Peralta?" ? And that's essentially what they're trying to do. Basically, what's going on is it's a nationwide and a statewide trend as well, namely taking the community colleges and trying to turn them into essentially prep schools for four-year colleges for the elite who don't quite have grades good enough at first to get into UC Berkeley or even Cal State East Bay or SF State. the original mission of community colleges, and thereby turning against the minority, non-white, and poor communities, which, especially at Peralta, and to a considerable degree at CCSF, despite the extreme gentrification of San Francisco, are still their main, essentially what they're supposed to be all about. The attack on CCSF, the attack on the Peralta colleges like Laney and Merritt, where I teach history, proud home of the Black Panther Party, may I say, is exactly what's going on nationwide. It is part of essentially turning education away from teaching the lower classes and perhaps giving them a chance of upward social mobility to concentrating more and more on the elite as American capitalism continues its downward spiral together with that of the rest of the world. And in my union, essentially, we may be heading into a strike due to the absolute hardlining negotiations of our Board of Trustees. And one thing I should say, over at CCSF, I'm very much in support of, people have probably heard of CCSF Heat, which is trying to mobilize students and faculty and alumni and everyone in defense of CCSF. They turned recently towards an attempt, which I hope succeeds, to lobby the Board of Supervisors here to provide CCSF with more money. And I wish them the best of luck in that, and they'll need it, frankly, because the Democratic Party and boards of trustees cannot be relied on in any way, shape, or form. Because the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, is the party of big business, and that's who dominates all of the. We can see that particularly well over at Peralta, where our union did its best to get elected last fall a Board of Trustees who were more favorable to the union, and slightly succeeded, but it didn't matter. Because although members of the Board of Trustees have given platonic sympathy to the union's demands, in practice, they have to function within the budget constraints and the overall plans of the state of California. So as a result, despite occasional words of sympathy, the Board of Trustees, we've got a new Chancellor, Regina Stroud, of which a few of you may have heard, who is well known as an excellent educator, but who unfortunately is also well known as an anti-union hardliner. And so that's what's going on at Peralta, and we may be heading into a strike situation we'll be seeing this spring. And what I want to say, just getting outside of the world that I've been wrapped up in terms of what's going on as an member of the Executive Council of the Board, that it is part of a worldwide struggle, and it's really important. Solidarity with what could turn, with what's going on in France right now is absolutely vital. And we have worldwide, in the last, starting with Algeria and continuing through France with a lot of countries in between, we've had an upsurge of class struggles going on with governments either in danger of being toppled or actually being toppled in many different countries of the world. A tendency that sooner or later will be coming to countries like the United States, as is evidenced by the current confusion in the American government and the current impeachment farce comedy that is going on, with Democrats trying to impeach Donald Trump for the crime of being, for only one crime, the crime of being not imperialist enough with regards to Ukraine, as opposed to all the other reasons that anyone could. I mean, honestly, what Trump has done with respect to Russia and Ukraine is almost the only thing that Trump has done during his presidency that he doesn't deserve to go to jail for. You know, and so that's, of course, that's what the Democrats are going after him over. And the American government, like many governments in the world, is in a state of confusion at this point. And so basically, but what's missing from many of the popular upsurges around the world is a conception that the solution isn't just, you know, getting more democracy, which is what people want on the streets of Algeria and Chile and Sudan and so many other countries. The list, Lebanon, the list, Iraq, Iran, the list is very long. What's needed is to get back to the idea that since capitalism doesn't work, the solution to the problems of capitalism is socialism. And that's what we need to bring forward, and that's what we need to adopt.
I just want to start by saying a couple of things that have been missing right here. I mean, France is an imperialist country, and not too long ago, and still does military operations in Africa. I got right here from a journal, a military history journal, detailing French military operations in Africa right now, particularly one called Operation Serval. And right here is an article that speaks about French rapid development, which enumerates the numerous kinds of aircraft and armored infantry and many weaponry. And I'm gonna give you the chance to take a photo right here in the cover of this journal of French troops doing intervention in Africa. France has a large corporate investments in Africa that they do exploit, such as water, mining, oil, all this in the former colonies through imperialist intervention. In order to secure France's domination of this country, France has performed more than 40 or 50 military interventions in Africa since 1970. I mean, ending up with the current one, Operation Serval. So, while the French corporate establishment, the capitalist class, which is imperialist, does these interventions abroad, the French workers are demanding higher salaries. They're defending their pension funds. They are demanding a better education. And this is consequence of this whole wide system. It's a worldwide system. It's called capitalism. It's imperialist stage. I want to mention that in that intervention that was done by NATO and the U.S. in Libya, the country that launched more airstrikes was the French Air Force, was France. Even more than the United States. So why did they do that? Because in Libya there were wide investments. There were so many European and American corporations, such as Repsol, Exxon, and many others, doing oil exploitation in Libya. And they decided to finish up and intervene in that civil war and intervene in order to establish their presence more permanent and to privatize all that state-owned property that it was part of the Libyan state, and make sure that the American corporations and European corporations that already were there established were more able to exploit the Libyan workers. And now that they did that horrendous intervention, murdering thousands of Libyan citizens and foreign workers, what has happened in Libya? It's total chaos. The European and American powers, they have made that there are more jihadis and Islamists and crazies in Libya than they were before due to their intervention. That's why we should always oppose military intervention. Any military intervention that NATO or the United States or whatever power in this earth performs is going to bring bad consequences for the working class, no matter what they say. The evidence is right there. This has been the case since the beginning of this system of exploitation called capitalism. One more thing about France. France is a nuclear power that has performed many nuclear explosions and tests in the Pacific. And many years ago, people probably will not remember that this vessel owned by the organization called Greenpeace, the Rainbow Warrior, was sunk by explosives that were planted by French military intelligence agents. And that was exposed to the international community. France had to admit that they were the ones that did blow the Rainbow national warrior. And in this Pacific region, not far from here, is a region called the French Polynesia, and it's a colony of France. And a few years, during the 80s, there were uprisings demanding more autonomy and independence. And the so-called socialist government of Francois Mitterrand sent a military task force to oppress these people and to oppress the uprising and the demands of independence. That's what the French government, which is an imperialist government, has done. And in the Caribbean region, where I am from, in the country of Martinique, there was a general strike in the French Antilles in the mid-2000s. It was a general strike so powerful against austerity measures, against privatization. And again, what was the response of the French government? Believe it or not, it was not sending wine and cheese. No, they sent the Garde Marie and military forces from France. Fortunately, as far as we know, that in that general strike, the French Antillians workers prevailed. And there were also demands for self-determination, more autonomy and independence in that general strike. And right here, I'm speaking to honor those fellow Caribbean workers that did such courageous struggle. And right there in South America, there is a region called French Guyana, which is a colony of France too. And approximately within this decade, there was a whole general strike that the French government had to send a representative to bargain with the residents of French Guyana. The whole country went on general strike against austerity measures, against the colonial domination, for free self-determination. And initially, what was the response? The response of the French imperialists was trying to deny the demands, trying to not concede anything. But again, you know, these workers waged a courageous strike, and again, we honor them for that effort. So France is not only about wine and cheese. It's an imperialist country, and I want everybody to know that in the classic definition of imperialism. It's a country that have banks, have multinational corporations that are, you know, own resources in the third world, particularly in the region of Africa, where the French military has over 10 military bases in approximately 6 or 7 countries, not counting the military missions that do train assets in the third world. I want to say my last sentence. In South America, French imperialism was notable during the reign of the military dictatorships that ruled the South American countries in the 70s and 80s. The French military sent a war criminal called Paul Assuseres, which was a colonel in the French army that had experienced torturing people in Algeria. And he wrote a book called The Battle of the Casbah, where he, details his own life. And he tells about him being sent also to Argentina to train the Argentinian military that was killing workers, students, and people from the civil society. That was done by French collaboration. And this cynic, Paul Assuseres, he died without being brought to justice. The only thing that it was done to him was that he was demoted of his retired rank in the French military. He died without any consequence. And that's what we are dealing. And that's why we have to appeal to the French working class and champion them in this struggle. The French working class has a long history, from the French Commune to Paris 68 to all these general strikes that have been happening And what is missing in France as well as around the world is the lack of a vanguard. We need a vanguard party. We need a new international. We need a party that proclaims to be the champion and the voice of the working class and needs to reach power and build the worker state that will confiscate all that corporate property, that will perform real land reforms, that will establish a dictatorship over the capitalist class. And I want to say, toward a world without frontiers, long live the working class, victory for the French workers.
Pour les dames de la terre.